a man named Jason began to speak with Princess Valdina, pleading with her to drop the formalities and call him by his name. The princess still remembered that gentle greeting as clearly as if it were yesterday, when he had so tenderly and respectfully kissed her hand. He was the man she had loved with all her life, who had once knelt before her in a grand spectacle. He was the one she desperately yearned to have, even if it meant giving up everything she possessed. In fact, she had sacrificed everything for him, only to end up a miserable prisoner being escorted by that very man and his subordinates. As she walked toward an unknown fate, she called out his name, Jason, her tone filled with the bitterness of betrayal and the sting of disappointment. Immediately, one of his men reprimanded her loudly, condemning her insolence for daring to speak His Majesty's name directly. She sadly recalled how she had given everything for him, yet he had coldly cast her aside, choosing the saintess over her as his empress. For him, she had stolen the nation's treasure, fought a vicious dragon in the prime of her life, and severed its head. She had even unhesitatingly handed over the nation's last remaining soldiers to him, offering him all her loyalty and support. She had personally handed him the throne, and her reward was a cruel betrayal that made her feel as if her soul was shattering from within. Jason justified his despicable actions by claiming that everything that happened was due to a prophecy, insisting that he had at least compensated her by making her son, Ryan, the crown prince. However, she countered him with the painful truth: their son, Ryan, was already dead. He had died mysteriously less than 6 months after she had sent the child to the imperial palace alone. In that tragic moment, she realized that she and her daughter, Leah, were next on the death list. Jason coldly reminded her that another ominous prophecy had emerged, declaring that she and her daughter would bring ruin to the kingdom. He then called her by her name, Medea, claiming he had already shown mercy by not burning her alive, as the prophecy demanded, but instead granting her a merciful death. However, all he saw in her eyes was still resentment and indignation. She confirmed with him that he still believed he had done nothing wrong and demanded he end it quickly, as she could no longer bear to witness the sickening scene. He admitted to regretting what happened to the children, but cruelly added that she would soon be with them, so she would not feel lonely in death. Hearing him mention children in the plural, she was utterly shocked and confused. Fear gripped her heart, and she refused to believe the terrible possibility, trying to convince herself that her daughter, Leah, was safe. At the same time, a young girl with pink hair appeared and apologized to Medea. Medea recognized her and, with tears of shock, asked Berna why she was here. She had entrusted Berna with taking her daughter, Leah, across the border, and they should have been somewhere safe by now. Berna confessed that she could not betray His Majesty, plunging Medea into complete shock and disbelief. Then, Berna hypocritically wondered how Medea could do such a thing, reminding her older sister that betrayal is a sin and that she must understand this. Jason coldly added that he believed the children would feel the same way if they heard this. At these words, Medea broke down, letting out a heart-wrenching scream, describing Jason as a monster more vicious than any beast, while he tightly gripped her chains. Berna watching her poor sister in such a miserable state, showing false pity and wondering what to do now. Medea cried out from the depths of her broken heart, accusing him that even animals do not harm their own young, absolutely condemning the atrocity he had committed. A guard shouted in her face, ordering her to shut up, considering her words blasphemy against His Majesty. But Jason stopped him with a single sentence, mockingly asking the guard if he thought he lacked such tolerance. He then turned to leave, bidding Medea a final farewell and promising that he would remember the services she had provided him. Jason turned to Lady Claudio, who had been watching the scene, and he advised her not to stay in the cold for too long. She thanked him for his mercy with false gratitude. As soon as Jason left, a cunning smile appeared on her face, and she walked steadily toward the prisoner, followed by 2 guards. Lady Claudio threw a small package at the bound and kneeling Medea, who looked at it in surprise. Medea opened the package and found something blood-soaked inside, and in that agonizing moment, an image of her daughter, Leah, pleading and crying not to be sent away, flashed through her mind. She let out a sky-piercing scream, clutching the object in her hand as she sank into an ocean of despair and torment. Lady Claudio burst into a fit of sharp, piercing laughter, mocking the pride she once had when she called herself a princess and comparing it to her current miserable and pitiful state. She continued to torment her psychologically, telling her that her homeland, Valdina, had fallen and her older brother had been torn to pieces by monsters. She placed all the blame on her, shouting in her face with an expression twisted by hatred that this was all because of a foolish woman like her. Medea fell into the abyss of despair, realizing that this was hell, a bottomless pit of her own making, a tragic end brought about by her foolish choices. But amidst all the pain, she looked at Berna, wondering about the secret behind the happy expression on her face. She held back from blaming her, remembering how Berna had once told her that they wouldn't have succeeded without her, as Valdina's loyal subjects and her older brother were formidable opponents. Only then did the terrible truth become clear, and she realized that the way Berna spoke of meant that she and her family had been Jason's allies from the very beginning. She remembered it was Berna who had instigated her to give the sage's eye to Jason, and she wondered if the betrayal had started from that moment. Berna corrected her with a malicious smile, saying she was wrong, and that due to her extreme naivety, she had never noticed anything amiss. She revealed the whole truth to her. From the very beginning, her entire life and everything she was had been nothing more than a game in her family's hands. Thanks to her, Berna's father would become the king of Valdina, and Berna would become the empress of the empire, while Medea was merely a broken doll in their play. She asserted that she was just a pawn on their chessboard, asking if she now understood the reality of her role. Berna added that Jason, of course, knew everything and had been with them from early on, leaving Medea to fall into a deep silence under the weight of absolute betrayal. Berna advised her not to be too sad, as she would soon see her beloved family, and she should be happy about that instead of crying. Medea swore to her, her eyes glinting with burning hatred, that she would never forget. She would never forget Berna, never forget her family, and never forget any member of the Claudio family. Berna was surprised by her reaction for a moment, while a drop of blood fell to the ground, marking the end of one life and the beginning of another. She suddenly opened her eyes, hearing a voice calling her Your Highness. She found herself sitting before a mirror, a maid asking for her opinion on the new crown, while another maid repeated the call with concern. She realized she had returned to the past, finding herself in a luxurious room, dressed in elegant clothes with a crown on her head. She touched her face in confusion, wondering what had happened, as she felt no pain. Instead, her body felt unusually light. She recalled her previous state, a body tortured, weakened, and on the verge of death, and now she noticed there were no scars on her skin. She looked at her hands in astonishment, discovering that the countless wounds she had sustained during military campaigns had completely vanished. She realized that everything happening around her was more vivid and real than hell, and she wondered if she had become young again. Her eyes suddenly widened, and she eagerly asked about the whereabouts of someone named Belius. One of the maids showed a confused expression and politely asked her to repeat the question. She clarified that she was asking about her older brother and insisted on knowing if he was still alive. The two maids exchanged worried glances, and one of them attributed her nonsensical words to the possibility that she was still under the effects of the horse-riding accident. The maid assured her that His Majesty the King was, of course, still alive, and a look of relief and hope appeared on Medea's face. As soon as she was certain her older brother was alive, she immediately declared that she must go see him. But the two maids tried to stop her, explaining that His Majesty was currently on the battlefield. She processed this new information, muttering to herself that the military campaign was not over yet, which caused concern in the maids who heard her mumble. One of the maids suggested summoning the royal physician, thinking her unusual behavior was caused by hitting her head when she fell from the horse. But Medea firmly rejected the offer, insisting she needed to confirm it with her own eyes. The two maids watched her prepare to leave with deep concern, their faces still showing confusion. She quickly rushed out of the room, walking through the palace corridors with firm, unhesitating steps. She descended to the palace cellars and found herself at the bottom of a long, dark spiral staircase. She stood before a huge, ornate gate, realizing it was a secret place that only members of the royal family could enter. An old memory surfaced of her kneeling in despair, declaring that the lands of Valdina were no longer safe and blaming herself for not protecting the Sage's Stone. In that memory, her older brother, King Belias, appeared and comforted her, assuring her that he did not blame her for anything and that all he cared about was that she survived. He then added with a kind smile that she must be happy, which was exactly what his little sister deserved. She returned to the present, trying to calm her rapid breathing, repeating to herself the maid's confirmation that her older brother was still alive. Then she walked toward the door. She concluded that as long as her brother was alive, the Sage's Stone must still be safe in its place. She entered the secret chamber and found the Sage's Stone, a glowing blue crystal floating above a stone pedestal, and she breathed a sigh of relief, confirming it was still there. She gazed at the stone with tears in her eyes, realizing its existence meant she could save her older brother. She remembered how in the past, Berna had always told her of Grand Duke Jason's suffering, and that the Sage's Stone was the only way to cure him. She also remembered her uncle's words, trying to convince her that the Sage's Stone was nothing more than a legend, and that they could borrow it for a while and then return it. He continued to persuade her that if relations between the two countries improved, Belias would understand. He then exploited her emotions as a mother, asking if she could accept her children growing up without a father. The faces of deceit flashed in her mind, pressuring her to hand over the stone, repeating words of love and concern for her interests. She remembered that in her previous life, she had stolen the Sage's Stone, which later shattered and was buried within the walls of the border kingdom, Kazan. Contrary to what her uncle had convinced her, relations between the two countries did not improve. Instead, that theft was the beginning of all the tragedies that befell them. Now, before the intact stone, she let out a long, hysterical laugh, a mixture of relief, bitterness, and new resolve. She knelt on the ground, placing her hands on the stone, thanking the ancestors of Valdina, the gods, and the heroic spirits who protected this land for answering her final wish and giving her a second chance. She looked up, her eyes glinting with strength and determination, and swore that she would never be a fool again, never. She stood in the palace corridor, having regained her calm and composure, thinking that there were now many things she could change. The princess reviewed the events, realizing that the Sage's Stone was still there, and that time had returned her to the period of the horse-riding accident, concluding she had gone back to being about 17 years old. She remembered that at that age, she had fallen from her horse on the way to a tea party. On that day when she nearly died, the maid Neriel had risked her life to save her, and she had felt deep sorrow upon waking to learn that Neriel had left the palace. She had been told that Neriel left out of fear for her life if she continued to serve a princess who had fallen from grace, and that anywhere else was better than this palace, which confused the princess now. She stood on the balcony lost in thought, completely certain that Neriel was not the type of person to leave without a trace or a word of farewell. Meanwhile, she overheard two maids talking, one telling the other that a woman named Gina was beating a maid in the princess's palace. She realized from their conversation that the maid was that strange girl who had given up her knighthood to serve the princess. They mentioned that she was rigid and had angered the head maid, and they were using the horse-riding accident as an excuse to get rid of her for good. One of them questioned the logic in this, as everyone had seen was that maid who saved the princess, but the other replied decisively that the head maid's word was law and they could twist the facts as they pleased, and they both agreed that no one would dare oppose that woman's whims. The princess suddenly appeared before them, to their alarm and surprise. She asked them coldly and firmly where this was happening. One of the maids stammered as she tried to answer, and in that moment, the princess realized the whole truth, that Neriel's case was also orchestrated by her uncle, so she forcefully ordered the two maids to take her there. In a remote room, the sound of a whip echoed as a woman screamed in Neriel's face, asking if she had to see blood before she would yield, saying that all she had to do was say she would leave. She continued the abuse, claiming no one would know what happened, not even her master, and that she would end up dying like a dog, so her stubbornness was pointless. She insulted her with the filthiest names, growing more enraged by Neriel's absolute silence and silent defiance. Neriel knelt on the floor, her face covered in bruises and marks from the beating, but her gaze still held a stubborn determination. Gina lost her senses and swung the whip with cruel intent toward Neriel's face. She mocked her loyalty, seeing her as a faithful knight suffering for choosing the wrong master. She raised the whip again to threaten her, asking if she wanted to die, but before she could bring it down, a hand forcefully grabbed her arm, freezing her in place, stunned and wide-eyed. She found that the one who stopped her was Princess Medea herself, who grabbed the whip with her other hand, and Gina cried out her name in disbelief. The injured Neriel stared at the princess in astonishment, unable to believe her eyes, wondering how her highness had found this place. The princess forcefully and roughly snatched the whip from Gina's hand, leaving her in a state of shock. Gina loudly condemned her actions, to which the princess coldly replied that was the same question she wanted to ask Gina. Then she asked in a tone of irrefutable authority who had given her permission to drag her maid away and beat her in such a humiliating manner. The answer came from another voice, as the head maid appeared at the door and said that she did it. The head maid arrogantly asked the princess what was the meaning of this disgraceful behavior emanating from her. Gina bowed to the head maid, who looked as if she had been waiting for this moment. The princess recalled in her mind how this head maid had taken over the management of the inner palace despite her lack of qualifications by acting as a puppet for her uncle and the minister of palace affairs. She was the vicious woman who had labeled the princess as frivolous and did everything in her power to isolate her from everyone. The head maid spoke in a tone of false concern, reminding the princess that she had just gotten out of her sickbed and shouldn't overexert herself. She then demanded that she leave, claiming the girls would safely escort her back to her room and order the other maids to escort her highness immediately. The princess sternly pointed out to the head maid that she had noticed her maid being whipped without her knowledge and without a fair trial, and indignantly questioned since when the royal family had started acting outside the law. The head maid claimed the princess's words had deeply hurt her, feigning offense at the accusation. The head maid justified her despicable actions by claiming that Neriel had not only neglected her duties, but had also allowed the princess to be harmed, arguing that this level of punishment was actually quite lenient. She firmly asserted that as a loyal servant of the Valdina family, she was only doing her best. The head maid added with a condescending smile that she must hone her patience, and that the princess still had much to learn. She then ordered the princess to be sent back to her room, but the princess stopped her, pointing out that there was something strange in her words. The head maid sighed in annoyance and asked what she meant, and the princess clarified that serving the Valdina family meant serving His Majesty the King. The princess cleverly continued, listing other members of the royal family, such as the Queen Mother and her uncle, Duke Claudio, and asked her directly if her loyalty was solely and exclusively directed toward His Majesty the King. The head maid was clearly thrown into disarray, gritting her teeth in frustration, while Gina seemed confused by the situation. The maids present began to whisper among themselves, wondering why the head maid would hesitate over such an obvious question. The head maid realized she had fallen into a trap, as she knew the regent, the princess's uncle, was a suspicious man who likely had spies everywhere, and declaring allegiance to the king here could put her in danger. The princess noticed her confusion and, with a cunning smile on her face, mockingly asked if the question was really that difficult. The head maid regained her composure, claiming she was only confused because the question was so obvious, and loudly declared that her master was His Majesty King Belias, to which the princess nodded in agreement. The princess then launched a direct attack, questioning the reason for abusing the maid His Majesty had left for her, challenging her belief that the girl was truly the one who caused the harm. The princess continued to press, demanding that she swear it on her loyalty to her one and only master, His Majesty the King. The head maid's anger reached its peak, her face twisting with malice and hatred for the princess who had cornered her. She wondered about the reason for the princess's sudden rebellion, but she realized she had to put her firmly in her place. She spoke contemptuously, declaring that she found this conversation pointless and reminding the princess that she was merely the king's blood relative and not her true master. She then elaborated, reminding her of the late king's funeral and how the queen mother's sorrowful wails still echoed in her ears as she had placed all the blame on the princess. She recalled the queen mother screaming that her son had died because of her. She added that the entire nation had grieved for their king that day. She asserted that she was no different from them, and that if it weren't for the princess's existence, they would not have suffered this pain. She concluded bitterly that if it weren't for the princess, she would still be serving the late king and wouldn't have to be teaching a maid such a harsh lesson. She arrogantly declared that it was obvious who was responsible for the tragedy of the late king and queen, describing the princess as someone who was only in the palace by the grace of her brother, the king, and was now trying to act like she owned the place. The head maid was certain in her heart that the queen mother hated the princess, and the king himself was no exception, wondering what other reason there could be for him never returning to the palace after his coronation. The head maid felt a sense of victory and, with a malicious smile, ordered Gina to immediately resume the lesson, who promptly agreed. The princess let out a soft chuckle, which surprised Neriel, who called out to the princess with concern. The princess picked up a wooden ruler from a nearby table, then calmly called the head maid over and ordered her to lift her skirt. The head maid was immensely shocked, her eyes widening in utter confusion as she asked what she had just heard. The princess, holding the ruler with a calm and confident smile, told the head maid that she would respect her wishes and not say another word about Neriel's matter. The princess added with a sarcastic smile that, on the contrary, it seemed an interesting play was about to begin. Since the head maid was there to teach Neriel a lesson, then she would be here to teach the head maid a lesson. The head maid froze, unable to believe what she was hearing, wondering if the princess really intended to use that ruler on her. The princess cited a royal law stating that if a person carrying out royal duties neglects them, the king can punish them. She added that in the king's absence, this right is transferred to an agent appointed by him. The princess showed a ring on her hand, revealing it was the royal seal her brother had left her, and asked if she recognized it. The head maid cried out in shock, saying she had never heard of such a thing before. The princess reminded her that when the late king was on the battlefield, the regent had used this very clause to severely punish the household servants, mockingly asking if she needed to be taught this as well. The princess described her as ignorant with a cold smile while tightly gripping the ruler. She firmly repeated her command, demanding she lift her skirt, and the head maid screamed in fear and refusal. The princess ordered her again to carry out the command, then turned to Gina and ordered her to resume whipping Neriel. The head maid hesitated to lift her skirt, thinking that the princess wouldn't actually dare to hit her, and that she knew full well how the princess would be treated if she resisted. She thought that unless the princess had gone completely mad, she wouldn't dare challenge her now. But the princess forcefully struck her legs with the ruler, and the head maid let out a scream of pain before collapsing to the floor. The princess then ordered her to stand up, asserting that things were just getting started. The head maid tried to plead with her as the scene shifted to outside the palace, where the atmosphere was tense. The princess was supporting Neriel, who had difficulty walking, and the latter asked her why she had done that. The princess asked her not to push herself and to lean on her, and Neriel thanked her gratefully. Neriel expressed her concern, pointing out that the head maid controlled the palace and would surely try to get revenge on her. The princess suddenly apologized, which confused Neriel. The princess sadly explained that Neriel had suffered because of her. She tearfully remembered that in her past life, Neriel hadn't just left the palace but had been beaten to death while trying to protect her. The princess cried bitterly, blaming Neriel for not protecting herself, asking why a former knight would endure those blows without any resistance. She blamed her own ignorance for not knowing that there were people like Neriel who cared for her in this vast palace, nor that her older brother, Belias, was also trying to protect her. She gently cupped Neriel's face and hugged her, vowing that this would never happen again. She stood in a sunlit corridor, confirming this promise to Neriel and to herself. The next day, in the 2nd district of the Valdina capital, a man rushed into an office looking for his superior. He told him that the most talked about topic of the day was what happened at the Valdina Palace, where the princess had supposedly whipped the head maid. The man said that the head maid had tried to expel the princess's maid, who was a student of the captain of the royal guard, and therefore a thorn in the regent's side. He added with a laugh that the head maid whipped the princess's maid, so the princess whipped the head maid, who supposedly fell after one strike, which meant the princess had a strong arm. His superior coldly wondered if Valdina even had a princess. The man replied that she was the current king's only younger sister, who was said to be cursed and had caused the death of her parents. This piqued his interest, and he asked what curse meant. The man continued telling his master, explaining that the story of the cursed princess was tear-jerking and had happened about 10 years ago. He went on to narrate the story, pointing out that the former king and queen went together to participate in a war that was sure to be won. However, the little princess who remained behind sent a letter expressing how much she missed her parents, and overcome with emotion, the king and queen decided to return to see her. On their way back to Valdina, they were ambushed by hired assassins and killed, leaving the little princess to keep vigil alone by their coffins. Naturally, the kingdom lost the war, and the entire country fell into a deep shock. After that, the queen mother relentlessly pursued the 7-year-old princess. The man finished his story, explaining that for a long time, everyone blamed the cursed princess. He showed an illustration in the book of a monster and a little girl. His black-haired superior scoffed at the fuss over a child, commenting that they were always talking about curses even though they had never seen a real one. The man, confused by his superior's reaction, stammered as he tried to ask if he was all right. The black-haired man stared at his gloved hands, saying painfully that 3 years had passed, 3 years of suffering under the weight of the so-called petrification curse. A memory flashed through his mind. Him in armor, his body enveloped in a dark aura, while a knight addressed him as Your Highness. A voice echoed in his mind, telling him he couldn't stop his body from withering, which made him look even more melancholic. He described his country as pathetic for a nation known for its brave knights, and asked if his attendant was correct, pointing out that despite possessing such great power, there must have been a reason for the country's collapse. The attendant agreed with him, then changed the subject, pointing out that the hated princess had awakened and wondering if she could hold on until the end, suggesting they keep an eye on her palace as things were getting interesting. His superior asked if he was bored, then inquired if he had found the priest of Shadia who could lift his curse. The attendant replied that they were still tracking her, last seen in Valdivia, but her trail had vanished at the border. He added that it wasn't easy to find a tribe that had long been extinct, as not even the Pope and the former emperor had managed to find them. His superior told him he was talking too much, so the attendant, realizing his mistake, assured his superior that he was searching every inch of the Aldina border and would bet his life that the priestess was in the royal palace. His superior warned him with a terrifying gaze that his bet had better be right or else. The attendant, panicked, promised to double-check as he left. The attendant reminded his superior that he would be entering the palace this week and asked him not to forget anything when he came out, admitting he knew his superior hated covering his face, but it was unavoidable. He explained to him that he had to hide his identity, then added with admiration that he understood why his superior hated hiding that unparalleled face behind a mask. The superior threw a dagger at him, bidding him farewell as usual, and the attendant scrambled out in a panic. The dagger embedded itself deep into the closed wooden door behind him as he let out a terrified scream. Meanwhile, the princess returned to the palace in a hooded cloak. She entered Nariel's bedroom and found her sound asleep, realizing she needed rest to recover. She examined her carefully, relieved that there were no broken bones, and that she would be able to continue using the sword she loved. She thought to herself that Nariel was her first and only ally in this vast royal palace. Therefore, to protect her, she decided she had to clean out everyone in the princess's palace. She heard heavy footsteps approaching and recognized the identity of the person coming. A red-haired woman burst into the room screaming loudly, addressing the princess as Your Highness and wondering what she had done wrong. She stood before the princess, telling her she had only conveyed her words as they were. The princess said to herself that the first person who had to be cleaned out was her head maid, Meryl, and at that moment asked her the reason for being so noisy. Meryl reminded the princess that she had ordered her to speak to the housekeeper, and that she had been at the tea party where the princess fell from her horse, that she valued justice. But the woman in charge of the kitchen had suddenly slapped her. She added that when she returned, she found her room and Nariel's room had been swapped. The princess listened calmly, then commented that it must have hurt and suggested she apply some medicine. Meryl was stunned by the princess's cold reaction. The princess sarcastically asked if she wanted her to apply the medicine herself, so Meryl became flustered and answered with a stammer. Meryl thought to herself that the princess wouldn't understand the situation, that all this time she had been able to enjoy the princess's favor simply because she was the daughter of the princess's wet nurse. The princess recalled in her mind how she used to forgive Meryl for everything, believing she was her only confidant, despite Meryl's arrogant behavior and clothes unbefitting a maid. She continued to reminisce until the day she sold her out to the rebels during the coup. Meryl angrily interrupted her thoughts, wondering how she dared to switch rooms without telling her. The princess, thinking of her own painful truth, remembered that she had sold her life in exchange for the position of her cousin's wife, and now she was rebelling over something as trivial as a room change. The princess asked her if she had to get her permission to take care of her own attendant. Meryl tried to argue, but the princess cut her off, pointing out that her arrogance grew endlessly every time she saw her. The princess told her she looked unwell and unable to judge the situation, suggesting she take a break and adding that she didn't need to work anymore either. Meryl, seething with anger, couldn't believe this was happening after she had groveled before her, and mentally described her as of mixed royal blood, half from a lowly wandering dancer. The princess tried to leave, so Meryl shouted for her to wait from behind. But before she could catch up, Nezuko suddenly leaped from the bed and attacked her. The princess turned around at the last moment. In the instant Meryl's red hair flew through the air, Nezuko appeared, holding her sword to Meryl's neck and ordering her to stay away from her highness. She warned her with a sharp gaze that her next move would be to slit her throat. Meryl screamed in her face, calling her a crazy woman and asking how she dared to do this, but Nezuko slightly cut her neck. Nezuko warned her that if she dared to recklessly reach for her highness, she would break all her fingers. Meryl backed away and then rushed out of the room. The princess told Nezuko that she hadn't rested enough, to which Nezuko replied that this was enough. The princess gazed at Nezuko's steel-like body and how she didn't hesitate to use only her left arm due to her injury, realizing she was strong enough to rival the 7-star Knights of Kazan. The princess declared that from this day on, Nezuko would be her personal guard, and Nezuko immediately agreed. She then ordered her to gather all the maids in the princess's palace. The maids gathered before her, and the princess announced she had called them to reassign the tasks entrusted to them. She told the 2 maids who had gossiped about her before that from now on they would be in charge of her clothes and decorations, which surprised them. The 2 new maids chatted happily, thinking it was great luck for them that the princess had fired Meryl. But soon their expressions changed, telling the princess that something strange had happened when they went to get today's supplies, so the princess asked them to elaborate. One of the maids explained that despite there being dry firewood, the supply officer from the Ministry of Internal Affairs insisted they only take damp and moldy firewood, and the other added that they were preventing common maids from entering their palace. The princess sighed, realizing what was happening was the housekeeper's revenge after she had reprimanded her yesterday. The maids spread rumors, wondering in surprise if the princess had really hit the housekeeper, Madame Cuisine, with a stick because of Nezuko. The princess sat down and opened her jewelry box, assuring them that this was her palace. These were her people, and she would protect any of them, not just Nezuko. She then expressed her regret to the maids that they would face a difficult time due to the housekeeper's malice, while they stared at the open jewelry box before them. The princess declared she would not yield to the housekeeper, warning her maids that if they didn't hold on now, the housekeeper would think she could take their lives at any time. She told them that while she might lack power, she didn't want to see them treated this way, and promised she would ask her uncle to mediate at the right time, asking them to endure for her sake until then and giving them some jewelry. The 2 maids were moved by her words, assuring her they couldn't resent her after knowing her kind heart and vowing to serve her with all their might no matter what the housekeeper did. The princess smiled warmly at them, thanking them for their loyalty. After they left, Nezuko told the princess that those 2 maids were the ones who often reported on her to the outside, and that she had given so much to those bat-like creatures. The princess agreed, affirming that they had to be dealt with. Nezuko asked about her plan, and she explained that the 2 maids would likely sell the jewelry they received as soon as they left the palace, which was exactly what the princess wanted. The princess revealed that every piece of that jewelry was a gift from her uncle. She described them as large jewels that looked expensive but had no elegance. Her uncle had given them to her, pretending in public that he doted on his niece. Meanwhile, he was turning her into a spendthrift princess in the eyes of the people, as if slowly poisoning her reputation. The princess told Neriel that rumors would soon spread and that she was curious to see how far her uncle would go to try and suppress them. Sipping her drink, she thought to herself that it was worth it to execute a plan through others' hands and pay a small price like some cheap jewelry. A few days later, rumors began to circulate that the princess's jewels were flooding the market, and with them came other rumors that it was the princess's maids who had sold them. People wondered why a princess of a kingdom would give up her precious possessions to please her maids. Unfortunately, while these rumors spread, the housekeeper's harassment of the princess continued unabated. But this time, the spotlight inadvertently turned to the princess's palace. The tongues of the court maids who had filled their bellies with her jewels became lighter and more venomous than usual, and the royal palace, which should have been a place of decency, began to be tainted with rumors of insubordination and rebellion. The main rumor spread like wildfire. They said the housekeeper was tormenting the princess. The scene returns to the blonde man, who tells his superior that the Princess Valdina is apparently facing violent retaliation. He listed the housekeeper's tricks, which were as cunning as those of their Western ladies, from mixing sand in her food to smearing scents that attract pests on her bed. He added that the circulating rumors were becoming more and more exaggerated, turning into something like urban legends. His superior, sitting at a chessboard, commented coldly, sarcastically wondering if they had nothing better to do since they had planted people in the princess's palace. His attendant defended himself, saying he thought there might be some useful information, then commented sympathetically on the poor princess's situation, who seemed to be struggling to hold on even after giving away the jewels the regent duke had given her. His superior was surprised, wondering if she had really given up her jewels, so the attendant confirmed that all the jewels had been put on the market and listed some of the gems' names, pointing out they were the type that the nouveau riche went crazy for. His superior was silent for a moment, then looked at the chess pieces in front of him, wondering if the princess was naive or foolish, and if she really thought she could gain her maid's loyalty that way. The black-haired superior posed a hypothesis to his attendant, wondering if there was another purpose to the princess's actions, which confused his attendant. The superior moved a pawn forward, announcing its promotion to a queen, which shocked his attendant, who cried out that his bishop was going to be lost. The superior looked at him with sharp golden eyes, explaining that although it rarely happens, sometimes the weakest and most insignificant being can devour everything. He added that the question now was how this pawn would change, what it would devour, or if it would be devoured in turn. He held the promoted piece, commenting that this was interesting. Elsewhere, the two treacherous maids were being dragged away roughly, screaming and wondering where they were being taken. One of them, tied with ropes, wondered the reason for this sudden action. Another lady appeared, scolding them for chattering after committing acts that showed no value for their lives, and announced that from this day on they were no longer attendants of the princess's palace. She added that countless maids in the royal palace had witnessed their shameful plot to torment the princess and then frame the housekeeper. The two maids screamed that it couldn't be, that it was a lie, claiming they were innocent and that the harassment was the housekeeper's doing. One of them begged for help, while the other shouted that the housekeeper was trying to drag them down with her and that their princess would not stand by and watch. The princess arrived and asked what was happening. The lady who had just appeared spoke to her, expressing regret for the suffering the princess had endured during this time. She told her that the housekeeper had sent them to right the wrongs and accused these arrogant maids of having been pitting her and the princess against each other all along, announcing they would be executed for daring to insult a member of the royal family. The princess calmly replied that she could see they must have worked hard, and the lady thanked her for her understanding. The lady added that she had also brought new maids, children who had just entered the palace, innocent and diligent. The princess commented that it was reassuring and that anyone the housekeeper chose could be trusted. The princess turned to the new maids, asking them to engrave everything they had just seen deep into their memories, warning them that if they were disloyal to their master and acted like bats, they would be dragged away and killed like dogs. She then asked the lady to convey her thanks to the housekeeper. Faced with the lady's surprise, the princess explained with a mysterious smile that thanks to her, she had lightened her workload. The lady stared at the princess with concern, wondering about the secret of her smile, and a terrible possibility crossed her mind. She secretly speculated whether the princess had deliberately used the housekeeper. Neriel asked the princess if she knew in advance that the housekeeper would do this. The princess replied with a cunning smile, confirming she knew and explaining that the nobles whose spies were suddenly cleared out of her palace would start monitoring her uncle, while on the other hand, her uncle would suspect the housekeeper and his rivals. The princess asked Neriel who she thought her uncle would blame, the nobles or the housekeeper. The princess answered herself, saying that at least it wouldn't be her. Neriel realized the princess planned to make them fight amongst themselves and commented that she was no longer the same princess she used to know. The princess agreed with her, confirming that the Medea she knew was no longer there. She added that after experiencing the brink of death once, she realized one thing, which was that she couldn't be a fool forever. She then asked for Neriel's opinion, asking if she hated a master like her. Neriel thought to herself that the princess in her memory was a person whose innocent humanity stood out more than her authority. Neriel recalled how she had wanted to protect the princess's innocence forever, but now she knelt before her, declaring she would pledge her allegiance to her. Neriel placed the princess's hand on her own head, confirming her loyalty, saying that no matter what kind of person the princess became, she would stay by her side. The princess accepted her loyalty and was relieved by it. The princess thought to herself that in her past life, she had had enough of her uncle and the housekeeper, and she could easily predict what they were thinking and what they would try to do. But what she had to be careful about was, just then, a teacup slipped from Meryl's hand and shattered on the floor. Meryl immediately apologized, saying her hand slipped and she would re-pour the tea right away. The princess thought to herself that this was a strange situation she had never experienced before. She had heard that when the maids were taken away, Meryl had quickly hidden and cleverly survived. She concluded that Meryl was probably trying to win her favor out of fear of suffering the same fate. So she offered her raspberry tea, reminding her that she had once said the tea Meryl prepared was the best. She added that she had adjusted the temperature just right, slightly cooled as the princess liked it. The princess refused the tea, saying she wasn't in the mood right now and telling her to come back later. But Meryl pleaded with her, telling the princess she had gone out at dawn and picked these raspberries until her knees were completely soaked. She begged her to take just one sip. Painful memories flooded the princess's mind, and she saw Berna forcing her to drink something, heard Jason's voice expressing regret for the children, and her daughter's voice calling her mother. The princess screamed at her to stop and pushed the cup from Meryl's hands, causing it to fall and spill. The princess scolded her, saying that her words weren't getting through to her at all and wondering how many times she had to tell her. Meryl knelt on the floor, begging for forgiveness, claiming she had made a mistake. The princess coldly ordered someone to take Meryl away. Meryl begged the princess not to hate her, saying that everything that happened was her fault. Neriel rushed over, asking the princess if she was all right. The princess replied that it was nothing. She asked Neriel to keep a close watch on Meryl. The princess added that she had noticed Meryl was wearing a beautiful bracelet that she couldn't have bought with her own money. The princess looked at the remains of the cup on the floor and noticed something on Meryl's hand, a treacherous flower pattern. She realized the bracelet she saw had a pattern that circulated only among a few members of the royal family in the Kazan Empire. She thought to herself that Meryl was a clever girl, making her a good bait. Meryl went out in disguise to a secret location. She entered a dark room where a silver-haired young man greeted her, calling her name. Her expression became blissful as she addressed him as Simon, telling him she had missed him so much. It seems this young man was the young Duke Claudio, Simon Claudio, who asked her what had happened, as he had heard all of Medea's maids had been replaced, to which she replied that there was nothing she could do. Meryl told Simon that the princess had suddenly pushed her away, wondering what she should do. But Simon cut her off, surprised that Medea would do such a thing. He asked her sternly what that meant. She feigned innocence, telling him it happened when the maids were being replaced, and that she said it because she was afraid of the housekeeper's retaliation. She added confidently that the princess cherished her again now, reminding him how much the princess relied on her. Simon told Meryl that the palace was in an uproar because of the housekeeper, which was giving him a terrible headache. He warned her that if she wanted to marry him, She had to behave properly and not ruin his justification for marrying a commoner like her. He grabbed her hair cruelly, reminding her that she had to be the most cherished maid of his dear cousin, to which she answered him submissively. She promised him she would do her best and would learn Princess Medea's every move. After her answer satisfied him, he embraced her with false affection, expressing his love. He then moved closer to kiss her. She returned his affection, thinking to herself with the bracelet he gave her on her wrist that she would do anything for him. She vowed to do anything for him, while Neriel watched her from a distance. Elsewhere, Neriel told the princess that Meryl was secretly meeting with a young Duke Claudio. Neriel added that if the bracelet Meryl was wearing was indeed a gift from a young duke, it meant the Claudio family was in contact with rival members of the royal family. The princess decided to wait and see for now, then drew Neriel's attention to something more important. The princess asked her about her master, Marquis Gilivas's location. Neriel replied that she believed he was living in a small residence on the outskirts of the capital. So the princess asked if she was thinking of meeting him, to which the princess gave an affirmative answer, confirming that Valdina still needed him. The princess explained to Neriel that the Claudio family had not just contacted the Kazan Empire. She added that she doubted Simon realized the bracelet he gave Meryl to win her heart could be evidence of treason. The princess concluded that her uncle thought now was the perfect time to usurp the throne, as her brother Belias was on an expedition. Neriel was shocked, wondering if the princess meant that Duke Claudio was preparing a rebellion. The princess explained that the Emperor of Kazan did not want to see Valdina grow strong, and that Belias had launched this illogical campaign precisely to break free from the Empire's control. The princess summarized the situation. Her brother had become a common enemy of the Empire and their uncle. She remembered that in her past life, a particularly harsh winter had struck Valdina, and the Kazan Empire had promised food aid, but at the last minute they made an excuse and refused to distribute it. All the people's anger and accusations turned to King Belias, and a rebellion subsequently broke out, which was actually a fabricated uprising led by fake rebels planted by the Claudio family. Neriel wondered if Kazan wasn't afraid of backlash, and how they dared to target the king of another country, even if they were a superpower. The princess replied with a calm smile that was why they had to stop it before it began. She added that a national hero Marquis who was a former commander of the Royal Guard would be useful in this task. The princess ordered Neriel to arrange a secret meeting with Marquis Gilivas, and Neriel immediately agreed. The princess stood by the window, vowing to herself that in this life, she would ensure those bastards wouldn't live to cross that wall. A lady came to visit the princess, and the princess greeted her, saying it had been a long time, Duchess. The Duchess took the princess's hand, asking her not to be so formal and expressing her deep shock upon hearing the news of her fall from the horse. Catherine Claudio apologized for her late arrival, citing that she had fainted from the fatigue of her journey. Her pink-haired daughter appeared at the door saying that it was inevitable, mother, and the princess looked at her with an icy gaze. Berna approached her hypocritically, wondering if her dear sister didn't understand their situation. She told the princess she had missed her so much that she had begged her mother to let her come along, to which the princess replied that she had missed her too. The princess thought to herself that the enemies of her family and country were engraved in her marrow. The princess clenched her hands, thinking that when she remembered Leah and Ryan, she wanted to tear them to pieces right now. The time was not yet ripe. She vowed to herself that she would bind them slowly and precisely until they reached the greatest pain imaginable. The Duchess asked if the princess's head hurt and advised her not to underestimate the effects of falling from a horse, telling her she had brought a doctor from Kazan, described as a divine physician, to examine her. She explained that the doctor was waiting outside the palace gates because he was a citizen of the Empire and could not enter freely, and asked for the princess's permission to let him in. The princess thought it was unsafe to bring a doctor from an enemy country into the palace. Berna intervened, saying that her mother had gone to great lengths to bring this doctor for her, and she didn't even know how many chests of gold it had cost. So her mother told her to stop chattering. The princess commented sarcastically that it must have cost a lot to bring someone from so far away, and Berna enthusiastically agreed. Berna added that her mother had personally gone to the Kazan Empire to get him, to the point that she sometimes couldn't tell who the real daughter was. The princess was surprised, wondering if her Aunt Catherine had really gone there herself, reminding her they were still at war and asking if the stern Prime Minister Caesar had really allowed it. The Duchess scolded her daughter Berna, then comforted the princess not to worry, as this doctor was just a physician accompanying the upcoming Kazan delegation who had visited them in advance, his identity confirmed and reliable. The princess pretended to be convinced but refused the offer, explaining that the court physician had already confirmed her safety and asked her aunt to put her worries aside and rest. The duchess feigned sadness, admitting she felt a little hurt and asking if the princess doubted the identity of the famous doctor she had brought. She pretended to cry, apologizing for her presumptuousness, but said she thought of the princess as her own daughter and wondered why the princess was trying to push her away. The princess remembered that in the past, she had been foolish enough to believe this was true love. The princess apologized to her Aunt Catherine, explaining that she was grateful for the sentiment, but it did not seem sincere in her heart. Berna protested loudly, asking her sister what was wrong with her today to say such things. The princess replied that she could not agree with what Aunt Catherine had said, to which the latter asked what she meant. The princess told her aunt that she knew very well what she meant, and that she must know what kind of treatment she had been suffering ever since her conflict with the housekeeper. The princess asked her why she could so quickly notice a hint of her annoyance now, yet was unaware that all her maids had been replaced. The princess, feigning understanding, said that she realized the housekeeper was her aunt's good friend, and her aunt must be in an awkward position between herself and her friend. The duchess tried to deny it. The princess asked Aunt Catherine if she would have remained silent like this if it had been Berna who had suffered this treatment. The princess added that her aunt might see her as a daughter, but she could never be her aunt's biological daughter, and she was deeply disappointed by this. She asked them to leave, declaring that she did not want to see either of their faces for the rest of the day. Before the princess left the room, the duchess tried to stop her, but the princess ignored her and slammed the door shut behind her. The duchess screamed at her daughter, wondering why she had to say things she shouldn't have. After the princess left, the duchess sat down wearily, thinking that she had tamed the princess enough, but it seemed her efforts were not thorough. She blamed the housekeeper for not doing her job properly. The duchess decided that she could not let this beast she had raised escape now, and that she must first punish the housekeeper to set an example for others. Meanwhile, Meryl slipped into the princess's bedroom with a handkerchief, thinking she had to be quick. She felt a wave of nausea holding the handkerchief, saying she felt like she would be sullied by the swamp turtle and that it smelled terrible too. She thought it was evil of the housekeeper to plot such a thing, which was to have Etienne marry the princess. She recalled that Count Lark Etienne was a hereditary noble who had built his prestige over 3 generations and was the current minister of the royal palace. Although he was a powerful figure, hailed as the Duke Regent's right-hand man, he was greedy to the core and a disgusting pervert. Just looking at him made her stomach turn, and now that his handkerchief was hidden in the wardrobe of the princess's bedroom, Princess Medea was doomed. She anticipated that this would be the juiciest rumor in the court for some time. She thought happily that this was what the princess deserved. She was caught in a scandal with a man in his 50s, and regardless of whether she was a member of the royal family, no suitor would dare to propose to her. She remembered the times when she had a good relationship with the princess, but now she sighed. She recalled the housekeeper's words, who told her that the princess was ignoring her, that the princess had started cleaning with the lower-ranking maids, and that Neriel had taken her place. The housekeeper sarcastically asked her if she was going to be the only one abandoned by the Duke Regent, and suggested she find a way to survive too. Meryl told the housekeeper that the princess was of royal blood, wondering if she wasn't afraid of divine punishment. The housekeeper assured her that if this matter was resolved successfully, she would get her into a noble family, as her husband's nephew had no heir yet. She added with a wicked smile that if she lived as an adopted daughter for a few years, she would become a noble lady. Once she became a noble, she could proudly become Simon's mistress. Meryl placed the handkerchief in the drawer, thinking not to resent her, because it was the princess who had abandoned her first. Neriel told the princess that Meryl had indeed contacted the housekeeper last night, just as your highness had said. She added that she was certain Meryl had slipped into the wardrobe near the princess's bedroom and hidden something. Neriel showed the handkerchief Meryl had hidden to the princess, who commented that with Count Etienne involved, the housekeeper must have been truly cornered. Neriel described the duchess and her daughter as vile creatures and told the princess that if she just gave the order, she could dispose of 2 or 3 bodies without a trace. The princess stopped her, reminding her that if she did that, she herself would not be safe. Neriel then affirmed that the princess was her master and savior. Neriel declared that she would give her life for your highness. The princess wondered what to do with someone so rigid, who seemed like she could explode at any moment. The princess reassured her that the time was not yet right. She then asked Neriel if she had said before that she was confident in hiding things well, which Neriel confirmed. The princess decided to use the housekeeper's gift against her. The princess showed Neriel a small box, explaining that a new maid had given it to her. The princess told Neriel that the new maid said Meryl seemed to have stolen her bracelet. She found it dropped and tried to return it, but the matter seemed suspicious, especially since Meryl was boasting it was a token of love, even though it was far beyond her status. The princess suggested they should return the bracelet to its owner, but that alone seemed incomplete, so she ordered the bracelet to be wrapped in Etienne's handkerchief and placed among Meryl's belongings. Neriel agreed to carry out the order. The princess prepared to leave and told Neriel that someone would guide them to the Marquis's territory and that her colleague was waiting with a carriage. The princess wondered if this colleague was also a disciple of Marquis Gillavas, which Neriel confirmed, describing him as a bit rude but extremely competent. Neriel added with confidence that the princess would like him too. They went out through a side door, and the young man waiting there commented that he never thought he would see a member of the royal family using this door. He told them that this was the door the knights used when they sneaked out. The princess thought to herself that he was indeed rude. The young man greeted the princess, commenting that he thought Neriel had dug a new tunnel to get out, and that waiting a little while shouldn't be a problem for a humble person like him. Neriel reprimanded him, reminding him that he was in the presence of her highness and asking him to mind his manners, to which the young man smiled brightly. The princess mentally described him as a rogue, but felt it was nothing compared to the scorn and contempt she had endured in her previous life. The princess told Neriel it was all right, then spoke to the young man, expressing her pleasure at meeting him and asking him to take them safely to the territory. The young man responded with confusion, then agreed. The princess turned to the carriage and told him they were leaving now. They headed to their destination, the territory of Marquis Gillavas. The carriage stopped, and the young man announced that one of the wheels had come off. He told them he would make some repairs. Neriel heard him humming and saying it would take some time, mentally describing him as a rogue. Neriel apologized to the princess and said she had something to say. The princess pulled back the carriage curtain and asked about the retired soldiers she saw outside. Neriel replied that their numbers kept increasing as the war continued, and some stayed here with their families. Others had their cities burned down or were disabled and had nowhere to go. The princess sighed, then announced they were leaving again. The princess finally arrived at the Marquis's territory and was greeted by an old man, who was Marquis Gillavas, the former commander of the Valdina Royal Guard. The princess greeted him, saying it had been a long time. The Marquis told her that time flies, and she had grown up a lot, to which the princess replied that he was still the same. Marquis Gillavas announced that he had long since left political affairs and had no intention of returning, and apologized for not being able to help. The princess assured him that she understood his position, but explained that her request was not related to his return to politics. She showed him a document representing her entire fortune and asked him to take charge of building housing for the retired soldiers within the walls of the imperial palace. The Marquis was greatly shocked, asking in dismay about the authenticity of the request to build housing within the palace. The princess wondered why he was surprised and reminded him that it was he himself who had stopped the carriage on the way here so that they could see those soldiers. The Marquis admitted that he thought she wouldn't have noticed them, as her entourage did not welcome them. But she wisely replied that not seeing something does not mean complete ignorance. She explained to him the harsh reality. The royal family lacked the ability to help, and the nobles ignored the matter because there was no benefit for them. For this reason, she could find no one else to trust with this task but him. The Marquis asked her why she would give up her entire fortune for a useless mission. She answered, simply and confidently, saying that she was doing what she must do as the Princess Valdina. In her mind, she recalled the tragedy of her past life, where the anger of the neglected soldiers had built up amidst hunger and suffering. The heroes who served the country turned into rebels, and she was determined to ensure that this painful fate would not be repeated. She explained that she could have asked Minister Caesar to handle the matter, but he did not care for the soldiers as the Marquis did. She affirmed her absolute trust in him and his devotion to the people. The Marquis fell into deep thought after hearing her words. On the way back, Neriel asked the princess if she was all right. The princess, holding the document, calmly replied that she was fine. Neriel expressed her confusion. The responsibility of caring for the soldiers lay with the royal family, and she didn't understand why the princess was spending her own money to do it. The princess playfully asked if she was afraid of going bankrupt. Neriel replied that she would serve her even then. The princess laughed, commenting that Valdina would become strong, and the idea of her going bankrupt and being supported by Neriel sounded nice. But Neriel's heart ached because of her detached attitude. She saw the way the princess spoke as if her personal well-being was of no importance at all. The princess changed the subject, asking Neriel about the handkerchief and the bracelet, and the latter confirmed she had disposed of them as ordered. The princess looked at the palace from afar, thinking that the chaos had already begun, or was about to begin. Meanwhile, the Queen Dowager angrily interrogated a maid, asking what was found in the princess's bedroom. The maid told her it was Count Etienne's handkerchief, while the housekeeper commented with a cunning smile that love had found its way to the princess. The Queen Dowager flew into a rage, describing the situation as a scandal. She screamed that this matter was directly related to the honor of the royal family and ordered Medea to be brought before her immediately. She swore with a fire in her eyes that she would not let that girl escape punishment today. Word came that Princess Medea was entering the hall, and she walked in with confidence and composure. The princess bowed respectfully to greet the Queen Dowager, but the Queen Dowager looked at her with fury and immediately ordered her to kneel. When the princess did not obey the order, the Queen Dowager became enraged, screaming at her to kneel immediately and beg for forgiveness. The princess calmly replied that she would do as her grandmother asked, but she wanted to first ask the reason for this sudden action. She added that she was worried that excessive anger might harm her grandmother's health. The Queen Dowager, even more furious at the princess's calmness, accused her of playing dumb in this difficult situation. She then revealed to her that the housekeeper had confessed everything, and that the princess was hiding a secret affection for a man. At this point, Duchess Claudio thought to herself that this couldn't be, as she knew very well there were no men around Medea, because the princess's marriage represented an invaluable trump card. The Duchess recalled how she had tried her best to push away any undesirable suitors and wondered about the source of this conspiracy. Her suspicion turned to the housekeeper Cuisine, wondering what was going on in her head to dare fabricate a situation she had not ordered, while the latter wore a cunning smile. The housekeeper stepped forward to apologize to the Queen Dowager, claiming that after she learned of the princess's love affair, the princess tried to silence her and even spread rumors that she was oppressing her. She added that as a loyal servant of Valdina, she could not turn a blind eye to the truth and offered Meryl as a witness to her words. The witness identified herself as Meryl, a maid to Princess Medea. Meryl gave false testimony, claiming that the princess would take her along whenever she went to meet her lover, and that she had tried to advise her, but the princess completely ignored her. Then she, in remorse, fainted, begging the princess not to forgive her, which added to the Queen Dowager's anger. The Queen Dowager screamed at Medea that things were getting worse and worse. Meryl thought to herself that the queen was thoroughly angry, especially since the other party in this scandal was Count Etienne, and she began to worry about the consequences. Meryl was afraid she would be locked up in a convent for the rest of her life. She wondered in confusion why the princess had pushed her away in the first place. The princess calmly broke the silence, announcing that if she had committed a crime, she was willing to accept punishment, but pointed out that the whole thing was just a strange coincidence. She reminded everyone that Lady Cuisine was someone she had recently punished for violating royal law, and Meryl was a maid she had dismissed for her lack of loyalty and constant problems. She then directly asked her grandmother if she was certain of the truthfulness of their testimonies. The housekeeper screamed, accusing the princess of feigning innocence in the face of conclusive evidence. She brought Meryl out again, who cried out that the handkerchief was indeed a precious gift from the princess's lover. The Queen Dowager wearily announced that she had ordered a search of the princess's room and commanded a person named Pinatelli to be brought in. Baroness Pinatelli, the Queen Dowager's closest aide, walked in and greeted her, announcing that she had returned after carrying out her orders. The queen welcomed her, and the Baroness replied that she had only carried out the queen's will. The Queen Dowager then asked her the decisive question, whether evidence had been found. Baroness Pinatelli confirmed that she had found evidence and held up a handkerchief belonging to Count Etienne, the minister of the royal palace. She dropped a bombshell, explaining that the place where the handkerchief was found was not the princess's room, which shocked the Queen Dowager. The Baroness revealed that the handkerchief was found in the maid Meryl's room. Meryl collapsed to the ground in panic and denial, insisting it couldn't be true. The princess calmly and confidently observed the situation, realizing that Meryl's attempt to feign innocence would be useless, as Baroness Pinatelli would never act according to Meryl's wishes. The scene flashed back to a memory from a few days ago, when the princess secretly met with the Baroness, who asked about the sincerity of her intentions, which the princess confirmed to her. She revealed to her that she knew about the case of her father's wrongful execution and promised to clear his name with the king's seal in her possession. The Baroness's father was the former minister of the royal palace, Suchin, who was executed on fabricated charges. The one who fabricated the charges was the Duke Regent himself, which explained why he had never been able to win the Baroness's loyalty. Back in the present, the Baroness presented another piece of evidence, an ornate bracelet wrapped in a handkerchief, and confronted Meryl with it, asking if she denied possessing it. Meryl was stunned, wondering why it was there. The Baroness confirmed to her that she seemed to be quite familiar with her own bracelet. The Baroness told the Queen Dowager that this bracelet must belong to Meryl, as several other maids had witnessed her wearing it. The Queen then ordered her to continue. Based on the fact that the bracelet was found wrapped in a handkerchief, the Baroness concluded that the Count must have given it to her as a token of love. Meryl screamed in panic, denying that the minister had given her that bracelet. The Baroness, with deadly calm, asked her who had given it to her then. She warned her not to lie and claimed she bought it herself, as it was an expensive piece of jewelry, far beyond what a royal maid's salary could afford. Meryl, confused, admitted that she had received it from someone else. The Baroness pressed her for the identity of this person, explaining that the trombone crest engraved on the bracelet could only be obtained by high-ranking nobles. Fear struck Meryl as she realized that Simon's mother, the Duchess, was in the hall. She thought to herself that if the truth about her relationship with Simon came out, the Duchess would never show her mercy. The Baroness continued to press her, demanding she tell the truth immediately, and Meryl stammered, unable to speak. Just then, the princess calmly intervened, commenting that it seemed the person exchanging tender affections with the minister was someone else. She then looked directly at Meryl and asked if her words were correct, and Meryl froze, stunned by the princess's composure. Meryl wondered in terror if the princess had known everything from the beginning. The princess said to her grandmother that since Meryl cherished this gift so much that she even hid it from her master, their feelings must be deep. The princess suggested with a cold smile that Meryl should be allowed to marry Count Etienne. Meryl collapsed to the floor, begging the princess for forgiveness, admitting her mistake and promising never to do it again. The princess replied sarcastically, wondering why she was asking for forgiveness when she was just supporting her true love, reminding her that Count Etienne was exactly the husband she had always wanted. Meryl denied it in fear and desperation. She imagined her worst nightmare, finding herself the wife of Count Etienne instead of being with the man she loved, Simon. Meryl screamed at herself in despair, rejecting the idea of spending the rest of her life with what she described as an ugly old frog, claiming she would rather die than suffer that fate. She collapsed to the ground, admitting that everything she had said was a lie from beginning to end. In a moment of desperation, she grabbed the princess's dress, confessing that the housekeeper had forced her to do it and ordered her to hide Minister Etienne's handkerchief in the bedroom. She revealed that the housekeeper claimed the Duke Regent was trying to fire her because of her dispute with the princess, so she decided to teach the princess a lesson. She begged the princess to believe her, explaining that she was blinded by the promise of becoming the adopted daughter of a noble. But the housekeeper angrily interrupted her, ordering her to shut up and accusing her of making up lies after being cornered. Meryl then fainted in remorse and apologized to the princess for her grave sin. The housekeeper spoke to the Queen Dowager, denying all accusations and asserting that the maid was trying to implicate her. Baroness Pinatelli intervened sternly, declaring that they had gone too far and reprimanding them for daring to offend the master who possessed the blood of Valdina. The Queen Dowager watched the scene with disgust, describing it as pathetic, and ordered the two insolent women to be dragged away. As they were being dragged away, the Baroness ordered them to be whipped to death and to have their hand tendons severed so they could never offend their master again. The housekeeper screamed that it was all a lie. She continued to scream that the princess must have ordered her maid to orchestrate this trick and demanded they let her go. In a final, desperate attempt, she called out to Duchess Catherine for help, asserting that she knew everything that happened was a conspiracy. All her screams echoed through the hall. After the chaos ended, the Queen Dowager cast her icy gaze on Medea, asking if she truly thought this would clear her name. She added that even if she ignored this incident, she had heard much about her unbearable behavior, and that it was her reckless display of the king's seal that had made her subordinates dare to disrespect her. In a commanding tone, she demanded she hand over the king's seal immediately, declaring she was tired of her foolish, childish behavior. When she found the princess did not answer her, she screamed at her again, telling her to bring the seal at once. Just then, the Duchess intervened with false tenderness, asking the Queen Dowager to calm down, asserting that her anger would harm her health, and claiming the princess surely meant no harm, that she was still young and naive and did not understand the power dynamics in the court. The Queen Dowager scoffed at the word naive, pointing out that even the younger Berna behaved with more dignity, and wondered how much longer she had to endure this pathetic girl. The Duchess suggested the princess ask for forgiveness, implying that if she swore never to repeat her mistake, the Queen Dowager might overlook the matter. The Queen Dowager flew into a rage, accusing the princess of being deliberately silent and looking down on her just because she was an old woman trapped in the palace, asserting that her twisted heart would eventually destroy everyone around her. She screamed that she was trying to push her into her grave, just as she had done to her late son. The princess broke her silence, answering confidently and calmly that the seal was a sacred trust personally entrusted to her by His Majesty the King. She added that regardless of the family ties that bound her to her grandmother, the king was the sole ruler of Valdina, and she could not violate his direct order. The Queen Dowager and the Baroness were shocked and surprised by her answer. The princess then bowed respectfully and said that as the head of the royal family, she asked her to please take this into consideration. The Queen Dowager was forced to admit that her words were true, acknowledging that she had no authority to cancel a direct order from His Majesty the King. But as the head of the family, she could not ignore her insolent behavior and ordered her to go to the chapel and pray on her knees in repentance. She added a harsh condition. She must remain there until the goddess herself granted her a revelation of forgiveness. The princess obeyed the order, and the scene unfolds in the vast chapel, where she kneels before the statue of one of the deities. A crowd gathers behind her, and they whisper among themselves that the princess has been in this state for half a day. Two nobles are talking about the punishment imposed by the Queen Dowager, which stipulates that the princess must repent until the goddess herself grants her a divine revelation of forgiveness. The man dismissed the idea of a revelation, pointing out that even a high priest would be lucky to receive one in his lifetime. He concluded that this was nothing more than the Queen Dowager expressing her intention not to forgive the princess until her personal mood improved, while the princess remained kneeling alone. Night fell, and the princess continued her devout prayers before the statue of the goddess under the bright moonlight. Neriel approached her, wanting to give her a blanket for warmth in the cold night. The rest of the maids stopped her, while the princess continued to pray, motionless. She prayed while looking up at the statue of the goddess, which stood tall against the clear night sky. Elsewhere, Caesar Emil Regus, the prime minister of Valdina, watched the scene from afar and sighed. 3 days had passed since the princess's punishment, and he had been quietly observing her from his office window. A man in a mask suddenly appeared, sarcastically commenting on the change of their meeting place, and suggesting that Caesar's motives were very transparent. Caesar denied it, claiming it was just a coincidence. The masked man did not seem convinced. The masked man pointed out that rumors about the princess had spread throughout the imperial palace and that she had been in this state for 3 days, indicating his obvious concern. Caesar insisted, It was a coincidence and asked him to get down to business, wondering what a trading company that dealt only in weapons was seeking in Valdina. Caesar offered to use his power to overlook the matter, which piqued the masked man's curiosity. The masked man pointed out that Caesar would not make such an offer without something in return, so he directly asked him what he wanted. Caesar let out a sigh of relief as he reviewed a document, realizing that with this huge sum of money, the royal finances could hold out for a while. He decided to accept a huge financial transaction in return. The masked man observed the Princess Valdina from the window, rethinking the matter. He looked at the princess kneeling weakly, thinking that even a newborn foal would be stronger than her. He wondered what stubborn secret she was holding on to endure this. Was she trying to win the sympathy of her iron-hearted grandmother? The masked man recalled his past, and how the emperor had tried to control him and tighten his grip. The more attempts at control, the more it fueled his anger, and he realized that deeper wounds were followed by deeper pity. Back in the present, the masked man caught a glimpse of a new figure's arrival from the palace balcony. He immediately recognized the man's identity by his build. The man who entered tried to approach the princess, but a maid stopped him, reminding him that it was the Queen Dowager's order. But he smiled contemptuously, claiming it would only take a moment and that he wouldn't disturb her prayers. He arrogantly introduced himself as Count Etienne, the Minister of Court Affairs. The Count insisted he just wanted a closer look at the princess and pushed the maid aside. One of his guards grabbed the maid to prevent her from intervening. The maid described his actions as disrespectful, but the Count replied with a lewd smile, reminding them that he was once a candidate for Her Highness the Princess's husband. He walked towards the weak princess kneeling on the ground, calling her name as he reached for her. But before his hand could touch the princess, a stone hit him with precision, and the Count screamed in pain and surprise. As he angrily examined his injured hand and looked for the culprit, another stone hit him. Count Etienne screamed in terror that someone was attacking and trying to assassinate him, while one of his guards rushed to him. Those present gathered in confusion, wondering what was happening, while the Count continued to scream for protection and help. Nearby, Prime Minister Caesar wondered what was happening outside. The masked man left, simply telling him that it was nothing. The masked man walked briskly away from the palace, and his attendant caught up with him. The attendant called out to him, asking him to wait a moment while he went to fetch the carriage, but the masked man insisted on walking with him. The attendant, puzzled by his insistence, told him that he was a man destined for the throne and that he would not allow him to be touched by even a single drop of rain, then promised he would be back soon. The masked man pondered the word throne, realizing that this destiny might not actually belong to him. As raindrops fell, he stood before the statue of the goddess, watching the princess kneeling beneath it, and described her as cruel. He recalled in his mind his uncle's angry words, doubting if he truly carried his blood and accusing him of having infinite cruelty, just like the one who devoured her mother. The masked man thought about the irony of the situation. The scene of being threatened by his own bloodline was almost. He was shocked when he saw the princess collapse to the ground from exhaustion. He stood in shock, unable to think of what to do in this situation. Despite the rain soaking her clothes and hair, the princess continued to pray. Some maids arrived with umbrellas, while the princess thought to herself that the time was not yet ripe. She resolved to endure a little longer and continued to pray before the statue of the goddess. Suddenly, the shadow of an umbrella appeared above her, shielding her from the wind and rain. The princess turned her head, only to be surprised to see the masked man walking away from her. She wondered about his identity, but he quickly walked away. The masked man smiled and commented that she was putting on a very interesting performance. His attendant caught up with him, addressing him as master and gently chiding him for leaving behind the umbrella he had given him. Meanwhile, 5 days passed, and the Queen Dowager angrily thought that the princess still refused to surrender and must be underestimating her. She wondered in confusion what she was trying to prove, as this all would have been over if she had just asked for forgiveness. Baroness Pinatelli stepped forward and asked for permission to speak. The Queen Dowager granted her permission. The Baroness explained that she didn't think the princess was doing this out of stubbornness or defiance towards the Queen Dowager. Rather, considering the constant sabotage from the housekeeper, she might just be trying to defend herself. The Queen Dowager scoffed at the idea of the princess being manipulated by a subordinate, but the Baroness continued, pointing out that the princess had no one to support her, so she was forced to fight alone. She added that she actually found the housekeeper's behavior suspicious and suspected there might be another motive behind her actions. The Queen Dowager agreed with her, admitting that the matter was indeed strange. She thought about how the housekeeper was appointed by the second prince, Waken, and if something went wrong, she should have gone to him. The Queen Dowager was shocked and displeased in her heart, not understanding why she had come to her, of all people. Baroness Pinatelli told the Queen Dowager that she had personally investigated the matter of the housekeeper. The Queen Dowager was shocked as she read the documents provided by the Baroness, discovering that the housekeeper, Cuisine, had been embezzling the princess's property for her own gain. The Baroness confirmed this, adding that she had been pawning the princess's personal belongings. The Queen Dowager concluded that she now understood everything. The housekeeper had orchestrated the whole incident because Medea had exposed her actions. The Queen Dowager was furious, vowing to deal with the woman who dared to use her to harm the princess. Just then, a maid burst into the room to report an emergency, announcing that Her Highness the Princess had fainted. Princess Medea appeared on the church floor, in a state of unconsciousness. The Queen Dowager rushed to the scene, shocked and wondering how things had come to this, realizing the princess's condition was much worse than she had heard. The Queen Dowager angrily rebuked those present, asking if they had just stood by and watched until she ended up like this. Someone tried to justify themselves, reminding her that she was the one who ordered that not even a sip of water be given to her, but she roared in their faces that they should have used their heads and wondered if she had to explain every single thing in detail to them. She then turned to the maids, angrily asking what they were doing and if they intended to leave the princess in this state. When she touched the princess's burning forehead, she was reminded of the painful memory of her late son, Johann, and wept for his passing. In a panic, the Queen Dowager ordered the royal physician to be summoned immediately. She yelled at them not to just stand there and to carry the princess inside at once, while the statue of the goddess in the background shimmered with light. In the princess's room, the Queen Dowager anxiously wondered why the doctor she had summoned long ago had not yet arrived. The Baroness comforted her, saying that a maid from the princess's palace had gone to check again and that he would arrive soon. The Queen Dowager noticed the extreme cold in the room, and a maid apologized. The maid promised to start a fire immediately, and the Queen Dowager reprimanded her, wondering why the maids were so poorly trained. The Baroness explained that the housekeeper had dismissed all the original staff, claiming they were causing problems. The Queen Dowager thought that Cuisine was causing chaos until the very end, and what she had heard was completely different. She had been told that Medea lived a life of luxury under the protection of the king and Waken, but now she could see no trace of luxury. Instead, the place looked as if it had been abandoned for a long time. Just then, the dispatched maid returned, and the Queen Dowager asked her why she had come back alone. The maid confusedly told her that the royal physician said he was too busy to see the princess right now. The Queen Dowager condemned this behavior, wondering what could be so urgent as to delay treatment for the princess, and the maid hesitantly replied that Miss Claudio had cut her finger on an invitation. The Queen Dowager flew into a rage, yelling at the maid and condemning the doctor for daring to ignore a royal summons for a mere paper cut. The maid fell to her knees and begged for forgiveness, while the Queen Dowager realized she had been immersed in her grief for the late king for so long that the king's only sister was being treated with such contempt. She ordered the maid to summon the doctor again, warning her not to tell anyone about her presence there. She then resolved to restore the discipline of the royal family herself. Later, the doctor arrived, complaining about all the fuss and angrily wondering if they were satisfied now that he was back. The doctor wondered where the princess was, pointing out that she was always fainting and he didn't understand why there was suddenly so much panic and screaming. A maid pointed to where she was lying. The doctor looked at her indifferently, commenting that she looked fine and wasn't about to die, and wondered why he was being troubled like this, being made to run around. The doctor angrily wondered if the princess expected him to bear the consequences of confronting Duke Claudio. The Queen Dowager suddenly appeared, reprimanding him for ignoring the summons and daring to speak so recklessly about the royal family. The doctor was extremely panicked to see her, stammering her name in shock. The Queen Dowager condemned a mere doctor for daring to harbor such disloyal thoughts. The doctor threw himself to the ground, admitting he had committed a capital crime and begging her to order his execution. The Queen Dowager looked at him coldly, telling him that if he was asking for death, perhaps she should grant his wish. She then ordered the guards to drag him out, announcing that she would punish him severely for the crime of high treason against the royal family, and ordered him to be stripped of his position. As the court physician, she added another severe punishment, banning his entire family from entering the capital for the rest of their lives. The doctor begged her not to do that. The Queen Dowager left wearily, pondering to what extent the princess's authority had fallen. She returned to check on the princess lying in bed and asked if her personal physician had arrived. One of those present told her he had just arrived. While the doctor examined the princess, the Queen Dowager waited outside. Baroness Pinatelli comforted her, confirming that Lord Horatius would examine the princess thoroughly. After the examination, the Queen Dowager asked the doctor about the princess's condition. The doctor apologized for his bluntness, but confirmed that her condition was very serious and vowed to do everything in his power. He asked her to calm her anxiety and get some rest. After leaving, the Queen Dowager looked at a luxurious, brightly lit house in the night, the cottage where Duchess Claudio and her daughter lived. She thought with bitter irony that the place where the princess lived was abandoned, while the residence of a collateral branch of the family was more luxurious than the palace itself. She realized she had been cut off from the world for too long. The next morning, the princess woke up in her bed. She asked the maid beside her how much time had passed, and the maid replied, "Your Highness." Neriel rushed to her, asking her not to get up yet and inquiring if she was all right. The princess noticed that they were genuinely worried about her. The princess asked Neriel to tell her what had happened during her absence, and the latter told her that Miss Cuisine had died in prison. She explained that after the princess fainted, an investigation was launched into those who had insulted the royal family. The Queen Dowager had personally intervened, announcing that she would restore the discipline of the royal family, and Lord Caesar actively assisted her. As a result, some nobles associated with Miss Cuisine were punished. Neriel excitedly added that thanks to this news, word was spreading in high society that the Queen Dowager's favor had shifted to the princess, and many also welcomed the weakening influence of the Duke Regent. The princess commented that this was good. The princess asked if a new housekeeper had been appointed, and Neriel confirmed that Miss Pinatelli had taken over the position, just as the princess had planned, and that she had already begun to clean up the darkest parts of the palace. The princess thought to herself that her uncle's left hand, Miss Cuisine, had been dealt with. Now it was time to cut off his right hand, Count Etienne. But before that, the princess asked Neriel about Meryl's current whereabouts. In a dark cell, Meryl was startled by a voice calling her name and wondered about the speaker's identity. Princess Medea appeared before her cell, and Meryl screamed her name in shock before realizing she had come. Meryl collapsed to the floor, begging the princess to save her. She admitted she was wrong and swore she would never betray her again. But the princess confronted her coldly, reminding her of how she used to fabricate stories about her in front of their grandmother and wondering how she could trust her words now, asserting that she would forget her promise as soon as she was out of danger. Meryl refused to accept this, begging her not to abandon her and asserting that she would do anything she commanded her to do. The princess asked if she could swear on it, and Meryl immediately agreed. The princess handed her a small vial and ordered her to drink it, explaining that it was a poison that would cause paralysis of the limbs as soon as it was swallowed. She added that, if the antidote was delayed, it would lead to death by cardiac arrest. Meryl stared at her in terror. The princess reminded her that she had promised to do anything and sarcastically asked if her oath was just a lie. Meryl reluctantly agreed, confirming she would do it. The princess revealed that she knew about her relationship with the young duke, Claudio Simon. She thought to herself that Meryl was still useful for getting a hold of Claudio's neck and crushing him later. Meryl brought a dress for the princess, and the princess agreed with her choice, noting that the plainer it looked, the better. The princess asked if she had taken the antidote, and Meryl confirmed it. The princess reminded her that she must not miss her appointments and must come regularly, too. Collect the medicine. Baroness Pinatelli came in and told the princess it was time to go, as the Queen Dowager was waiting for her. The princess agreed to go. The princess sat down for tea with the Queen Dowager and Berna. The Queen Dowager commented that despite being ill for several days, her proper demeanor showed that she had fully recovered. The princess thanked her for her concern, but Berna rudely interrupted her, wondering when her manners had become so elegant and accusing her of playing dumb in front of the etiquette teacher appointed by her mother. The princess calmly replied that the teacher sent by her aunt taught noble etiquette, which was different from what she needed to learn, so it couldn't be helped. Berna cried out that it was impossible, as she had also learned from that teacher. Berna sarcastically asked if the princess meant that she had also learned incorrectly. The Queen Dowager intervened and told Medea that for the only princess of the kingdom, she was dressed very plainly. She then ordered a gift to be brought for her. The Queen Dowager presented the princess with a luxurious box containing a set of precious jewels, and the princess thanked her. Berna watched this with jealousy and malice, wondering the reason for her grandmother's sudden generosity and worrying that Medea would take all the good things. Berna rudely suggested that if her sister couldn't choose a piece of jewelry, she would choose first, then happily wondered which one she should pick among all these beautiful ornaments. But the Queen Dowager was angered by her behavior and scolded her to her face, asking how she dared to do that. Berna stammered in shock, calling out to her grandmother in confusion. The Queen Dowager angrily asked when she had given her permission to take the jewelry and rebuked her for touching the princess's body so carelessly. Berna tried to argue that her sister hadn't chosen, and the Queen Dowager yelled at her, saying she must address her properly, not as sister, but as your highness. She continued to scold her, wondering if she thought she was of the same status as Valdena just because she lived in the palace. She ordered her to observe the proper etiquette between a monarch and a subject and addressed her by her full name, Berna Levin Claudio. Berna protested that she had only done what she always did and wondered why she was suddenly being targeted. Berna, furious, yelled at her grandmother that this was too much, then left the room crying, leaving the Queen Dowager to lament how childish she was. The Queen Dowager admitted to herself that she had failed to see how immature she was and that she had spoiled her too much. Princess Medea intervened, asking her grandmother to be understanding of Berna. She explained that she and Berna lived together in the palace and did everything together, and that everything the princess had, Berna also had, so her grandmother's words must have seemed confusing to her. The princess's words angered the Queen Dowager, who wondered in her heart if Berna really had everything Medea had. She thought of the vast difference between them. Berna was a princess of a collateral line, while Medea was a princess of the direct line. How could that be possible? Her thoughts were interrupted by the princess's voice, asking for permission to choose a piece. The princess chose an ornate fan. The Queen Dowager wondered if it was too simple, but the princess confirmed that she liked it very much. The fan was a good weapon, as its ribs were made of Damascus steel. The Queen Dowager thought her choice was too plain, even shabby. She wondered where the rumors about the princess's extravagance had come from. The Queen Dowager agreed to her choice, and the princess thanked her and asked to leave, promising to visit her again. After they left, the Queen Dowager wondered if Berna was the only one who truly didn't know her place. She thought anxiously that if the second prince, Joaquin, had any dangerous ideas, she must take action, and ordered Baroness Pinatelli to send a letter. The Queen Dowager decided that the royal relatives must be summoned. Elsewhere, Duke Claudio was furious about his mother's decision to summon the Margrave of Montega. He believed the decision was clearly meant to keep him in check, especially since the Margrave had always been attached to his elder brother. His wife told him that Berna had returned in tears after being scolded by the Queen Dowager for not addressing Medea properly. The Duke expressed his confusion at his mother's sudden actions. He added that with the Queen Dowager's intervention, their losses had become enormous. The syndicate for embezzling royal funds had been dismantled, and she had even kicked them out of the cottage where they lived within the palace grounds. The Duke shouted in anger that public opinion had already sympathized with the princess, and his wife tried to calm him down. Duke Claudio angrily wondered how he could be calm when their revolutionary plans were on the verge of collapse, especially after the money promised to the mercenaries was discovered. He worried that if they found out Medea was not the real cause of all this, his throne would be lost. His wife tried to reassure him, asserting that his power still remained, and although they had lost the housekeeper, the minister of the inner palace was still on their side, allowing them to move the inner court as they pleased. She added that there was no need to worry about the Count of Montega either. All they had to do was strike first. The Duke asked if she had a perfect plan. With a cunning smile, she suggested holding a grand banquet to celebrate Medea's recovery. She explained that the poor child had suffered a lot recently, and everyone would see Medea smiling amidst gold and treasures, re-establishing her image of extravagance. The Duke agreed with the idea, admiring her shrewdness. The Duchess asserted that they just needed to do what they were used to doing, and, as always, Medea would be their shield. Elsewhere, Princess Medea summoned Neriel to her room. Neriel came in and told her that she had relayed the message to Umberto as she had commanded. The princess commented that her colleague seemed more talented than she had expected, as Umberto must have been very careful. Neriel told her that her colleague, Tom, begged her to summon him again. Neriel wondered where she planned to use him, while the princess thought that a hunt first required setting a trap. The princess ordered Neriel to have Tom keep a close watch on Umberto. Now that the hunting ground was ready, the princess thought it was time to meet the hunter. Prime Minister Caesar came to the princess's palace and greeted her. The princess welcomed him, commenting that it had been a long time. Caesar told her that he was informed she had something to say. Caesar thought to himself that she had been very quiet lately and wondered what she was planning now. He told himself that Claudio's influence was finally starting to wane, and he could not miss this moment. He requested the princess to stop if she intended to use her seal against the Claudio family. He pleaded with her to reconsider, explaining that the man was a plague on Valdina. The princess replied that this was the real reason she had come today, while she noticed a peculiar scent in the tea. She asked Caesar if he had brewed the tea himself, as the scent was unique. He replied that it was a medicinal tea prepared by his maid, and offered to prepare another tea if she did not like the taste. The princess commented that the medicinal tea must be very good for him. She then turned to Caesar's maid and suggested she try it. The maid was thrown into confusion. Caesar asked the reason for her sudden action, and the princess replied that she was moved by the loyalty of a maid who brewed tea with her own hands. She added that it was a waste for one person to drink such a healthy tea alone. The maid stammered, claiming she wouldn't dare. The princess insisted that the maid drink, asserting that she was making her repeat herself. Caesar intervened, asking the princess to tell him the reason for her strange behavior. The princess walked towards the maid and ordered her to drink. Fear seized the maid, and she froze on the spot. Caesar suddenly rose from his seat, calling out to the princess to try and stop her. The princess coldly asked the reason for the maid's refusal, wondering if it was because she couldn't drink a poison that would cause madness. Caesar was utterly shocked, while the princess explained to the maid that her master was defending her without even knowing he had been ingesting poison all along. The maid fell to her knees, admitting she had committed a capital crime. She continued to weep and confessed she had only done it for fear of losing her life, and begged the princess to forgive her. Caesar listened to her confession with a look of astonishment on his face. The maid begged to accept any punishment imposed on her, as long as it wasn't that poison. Caesar rushed to her, wanting to know what was happening and realizing the truth of the poison's existence. The maid tearfully confessed that Duke Claudio had threatened her and ordered her to make Mr. Caesar drink this tea regularly, as it would cause madness over time. The princess remembered that in her previous life, she had also found it strange that the brilliant man, Caesar, had suddenly and inexplicably retired, only to commit suicide after being unable to bear the madness that had taken control of him. In the present life, the princess told Caesar that she would leave the fate of that maid in his hands. Caesar ordered the guards to take the girl out of the room, and the maid begged the princess for mercy. As she was dragged away, she continued to scream and plead with her master, Caesar. After the door closed, Caesar asked the princess how she knew the tea was poisoned. She replied that it was a scent she had encountered before and that she was just lucky. She thought to herself that the difficulties she had faced in her previous military campaigns had borne fruit. If she hadn't smelled that scent before, she would never have been able to identify it. It was the scent of Halos grass. She explained to him that Halos was a deadly poisonous herb that could cause madness by scent alone and advised him to take an antidote for the time being. Caesar asked the reason for her sudden change of stance, reminding her that she had been protecting the Claudio family all this time. She replied that she saw the truth after coming close to death. She told him that she knew exactly what her uncle's goal was, and she was sure he knew it too. She then announced that she had come today to make her goal clear, which was to protect the land of her brother Belia's Valdina. To achieve this goal, she told him that she would cut off her uncle's right hand, represented by Count Etienne, and that she wanted his help in regaining control of his magic. Caesar commented that the Count was not an easy target, but readily agreed to help her. He finally asked her to tell him her plan. The masked man's attendant, Carlo, asked his master if he was really not going to the banquet, pointing out that there was an invitation addressed directly to him. But his master ordered him to forget about it. Carlo insisted that as long as they were staying in Valdina, they should at least meet Duke Claudio and suggested going to see the banquet held to celebrate the princess's recovery. Carlo excitedly discovered an invitation addressed to the Acant's mercenaries. Carlo sarcastically commented that they must have heard of his master's bad reputation and wondered if this would be interesting. His master called him by his name, Carlo. Carlo was thrown into confusion, and his master ordered him to go and bring someone named Terence immediately. Elsewhere, Terence told his master that the intervals between his attacks were getting shorter, and even with magic, it was becoming harder for him to delay them. He asked his master if he was listening, and he calmly replied that he was, while putting on his shirt. Terence reminded him that 3 years had passed since the curse was placed on him, and his body had surpassed its limits. He requested his master to return to the magic tower with him. Perhaps the Archmage couldn't completely lift the curse, but at least he could slow its worsening. The master scoffed at the idea of waiting for a slow and painful death and told Terence that he knew the truth just as well as he did. He added with a confident smile that it wasn't his style. Terence commented that his master's gaze was sharp, always able to sweep away everything. Those who stood in his way. He was the first Prince of Kazan, the youngest commander-in-chief, the Duke of Romania, and the leader of the Paysad mercenary group. He had earned all these titles with his own strength. But Terence wondered if he was truly certain that the priestess could lift the curse, and what he would do if she failed. His master confirmed to him that as long as there was a sliver of a chance, he would not give up. He had fought his way through every obstacle, holding on to that one thread of hope. He disguised himself as a mercenary working for an arms dealer and made an unprofitable deal with his academy classmate, Caesar. Every moment leading to the current situation had been nothing but a huge gamble, and he did not want a peaceful death. Meanwhile, Princess Medea arrived at a slum district. Neriel suggested they go back, but the princess insisted on moving forward and confirmed with Neriel if the person she was looking for was a retired soldier. Neriel clarified that it was the veteran's family. Neriel wondered why they refused to enter the veteran's village that the princess had ordered to be built, and whether they held a grudge against the royal family. The princess replied that she didn't know and thought of the Kessie Relief Center she had commissioned Marquis Gilivas to build. She remembered that although half of the veterans living outside the city walls had entered the relief center, many had yet to do so. She thought with concern that among those people was the second in command of the rebel army who had captured her in her past life. She decided she had to meet him first before deciding whether to spare his life or kill him preemptively. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of an argument, as a man was trying to snatch bread from a small child. Neriel intervened, but the princess only asked her to ensure no one got hurt. As Neriel stepped forward, an old woman's voice called out to the princess, addressing her as, "Oh, silver-haired young lady." She offered to tell her fortune and told her not to be deceived by her appearance, as she was the deepest-rooted and oldest tree in this kingdom. Then she held out her hand, offering to predict her future. The princess refused the fortune-teller's offer, thanking her and asserting that she already knew her future. But the fortune-teller insisted that was all the more reason to take a look and asked if this life shouldn't be different from her previous one. The princess reluctantly agreed, and the fortune-teller described her decision as wise. The fortune-teller revealed 2 glowing crystal orbs and told her that this life would not be easy either. She added that chaos blocked her path, that it still obscured the heavenly way and was trying to steal her light. But she reassured her not to worry, because a great falling star would cleave the chaos ahead for her. The princess rejected the prophecy, asserting that she didn't need any help and could handle it herself. The fortune-teller muttered that it would be difficult as something bad and sticky was attached to her. She called her miss and grabbed her hand, asking if she had heard of the Tears of Dawn. The princess wondered in confusion what Tears of Dawn meant. The fortune-teller explained that this mysterious elixir carried the power of the goddess and could erase everything in this world, diseases, memories, and even fate itself, and that those tears would save that great star. She grabbed the princess's hand and told her that the heavens favored her deeply, even obscuring the starlight and moving the 12 constellations to allow her to return to the past. She reminded her that the blood of the one who was once the wisest on the continent and conveyed the goddesses will float in her veins, and confirmed that she was the only one in the world who could find those tears. Suddenly, the fortune-teller coughed up blood. The princess suggested she see a doctor, but the fortune-teller refused, believing it was was just a warning from the heavens. She told the princess that her heart was still as kind as ever and asked her to hurry on her way, as her time had not yet come. As the princess left, the fortune teller asked her not to forget her words. The princess pondered the tears of dawn and the fallen great star. Meanwhile, the masked man and his men arrived at the slums and passed by them. They confirmed they were in the right place. Two frightened children sat in a corner. Carlo told the masked man that his informant had seen an old person in these blocks speaking the ancient continental language, and that their belongings had a symbol similar to that of the Sadia tribe. Terence warned him not to get his hopes up, as that tribe had gone extinct long ago, and it would be difficult to confirm a matter. The men got lost in the numerous alleys. The fortune teller suddenly appeared, commenting that they were late and that she thought she would have gone to the other world first. The masked man asked if she was the shaman of Sadia. The fortune teller laughed, calling him Black Star, and told him that something evil had become pitifully intertwined with his destiny. She added that the primordial darkness clings to its victim until their last breath and does not leave easily. The masked man knelt on the ground and asked if she knew a way to lift the curse. He told her he had been searching for her, the one who once led the Sadia tribe, and promised to help her rebuild the tribe if she could help him. The fortune teller told him with a mocking smile that the fate of her people was not for him to influence, but that she knew how to remove the curse. She explained to him that he needed the tears of dawn to purify the primordial evil. Carlo asked her what those tears were. She replied that it was the sorrow left on earth by the goddess. She further explained, when the goddess first descended upon this world, the earth was filled with chaos and darkness. Her benevolent heart took pity on the suffering of all beings and shed tears that washed away all darkness. The masked man asked where to find them. The fortune teller regretfully told him that they did not exist in his world. Terence asked in confusion what she meant by her words. She replied that he would not find the tears in the end, because fate would not allow it. Then she coughed up blood again. The masked man tried to help her, asking her to save her strength. He told her she must get treatment first, but she insisted he listen to her and told him that the golden star of Valdina could guide him. She confirmed to him that this was the only way and then drew her last breath. She muttered her last words, saying that the stars had finally converged again and prayed that it would succeed this time. Terence announced that she had passed away. Carlo expressed his dissatisfaction that she had died so suddenly just after being found, leaving only these cryptic words. The masked man repeated the phrase the golden star of Valdina can save you in his mind. Then he ordered Carlo to contact home and announced that he needed to stay in Valdina for a longer period. The masked man recalled his meeting with the princess in the rain. She was the golden star of Valdina. Meanwhile, Neriel apologized to the princess, thinking she should have stayed by her side the whole time, but the princess reassured her not to worry. The princess asked if the place she was looking for was nearby. Neriel gave an affirmative answer, confirming that it was exactly what was written on the note her master had given her. Their conversation was interrupted by a man's scream, demanding a girl to hand over Theo. The girl then yelled, shouting in his face that she didn't know his whereabouts and that he had run away a long time ago. The man refused to believe her and threatened that if she continued to be stubborn, he might sell her off first. He then reached out to grab her, ordering her to come with him. Neriel suddenly intervened, startling the man. The man panicked, wondering who they were and where they had come from. The man cursed the situation and then fled, vowing to return later. The girl thanked the princess for saving her. The princess asked if her brother's name was Theo. The girl confirmed this, explaining that he was her twin brother. The word twin triggered a painful memory for the princess, and she saw herself hiding from pursuers. The princess recalled a scene from her past life where Theo had given the order to arrest her. The princess noticed that the girl before her bore a striking resemblance to the Theo she had met in her past life. The princess asked if the girl lived here alone, without family, and she gave an affirmative answer. She added that her brother had left home 3 years ago, and although he sent messages from time to time, he said he couldn't come home for now. The princess deduced that Theo must have joined the rebel army 3 years ago. The girl interrupted her thoughts, recognizing her as the princess from the royal palace because she had just heard the man address her as Your Highness. The girl pleaded with the princess to take her with her, as she would eventually be sold if she stayed here. The princess refused her request, but told her she could offer a way for her to survive without having to be by her side, as she keeps no one by her side. The girl tried to persuade her, asserting that she could do any job, even secret missions or things the princess might find inconvenient to ask of others. The princess warned her that she might regret taking her on as a handmaiden, but the girl insisted it was her choice and that it was fine. The princess finally agreed and told her to come with her. The princess held out her hand, and the girl joyfully placed her hand in hers, agreeing immediately. Meanwhile, armed men were surrounding the place, listening to their discussion. A man blocked their way, asking with a sarcastic laugh where they were rushing off to. He added that they still had some scores to settle. The girl realized they were a human trafficking gang. The man told the princess that they were supposed to receive a large sum of money for that young lady. A man demanded the princess hand over everything she had on her if she didn't want to get hurt. The princess called for Neriel, who threw a bag of money on the ground. The man picked up the bag, and the princess commented that it should be more than enough. The princess announced she was buying the child, and the man sarcastically commented that they had a big spender here. But he suddenly changed his mind, pointing out that the money might be enough for a scrawny girl like her. He added greedily that if he took the young lady with him, he could easily get 5 times the amount. The princess told the girl, whose name was Saya, to wait in the carriage for a moment, then ordered Neriel to handle the matter. One of the men mocked Neriel for daring to step forward alone and vowed to make her beg on her knees. But Neriel attacked them with exquisite skill and speed. After Neriel severed one of the men's arms, he screamed in pain. The gang leader realized this guard was incredibly strong and contemplated his next move. The gang leader ordered his men to seize the princess. The princess remembered the painful lesson she had learned in her past life. She had learned it from a knight who treated her as a burden rather than the great duchess, and from Jason, who stood by and did nothing. She realized she had to protect her own body herself. The princess caught the attacker by surprise, stabbing him in the neck with a fan blade. Neriel called out to her anxiously as the princess pulled out her dagger. Another man attacked her, cursing her for her insolence. Saya screamed, reminding the princess to dodge the attack. But to the princess's surprise, the enemy's dagger was deflected by a stone thrown by a third party. Neriel apologized for not being faster, but the princess reassured her that she was fine. Neriel asked sternly if she should kill them all, but the princess refused, thinking there was no need to get their hands dirty, telling her their time was precious and ordering her to handle it properly. Neriel walked towards the men, and the leader began to beg for mercy this time. The carriage carrying the princess and Saya drove away, while Carlo laughed sarcastically. Carlo commented that she was quite the killer and asked his master if that woman was the princess of Aldina. The masked man wondered what kind of princess would fight in such a manner, noting that she only attacked vital points. He mused to himself whether the golden star of Aldina was truly human. Later, Neriel told the princess that the child she brought back was adapting well and that the maids were fond of her because she was diligent and a fast learner. The princess asked Neriel if she had found the fortune teller she mentioned, and Neriel regretfully told her they couldn't find any trace. The princess thought to herself that she had wanted to see her again. She recalled the fortune teller's words, saying that the blood of the wisest person on the continent flowed in her body. She was curious about the meaning of those cryptic words. Suddenly, the princess realized something and thought of the wise one. She rose quickly, surprising Neriel. The princess rushed to the secret cellar, thinking about the sage, the wisest person on the continent, and Valdina, the land protected by their gem. She realized the reason the sage's stone protected this land was that its owner was an ancestor of Valdina. She stood before the glowing sage's stone and asked it to tell her if it had anything to say to her. The gem emitted a bright light, and she wondered if this was the tears of dawn. In District 1 of Valdina, Duchess Claudio asked the princess if she enjoyed the performance. Duchess Claudio told the princess that since it was her favorite opera, she had personally sought out a new cast and orchestra and asked if she liked the performance. The princess replied that now she understood why she found the performance unusually awkward. The Duchess feigned regret, claiming she should have realized sooner that the performance did not meet her expectations. She sarcastically added that her aunt had been negligent and asked her not to be angry. The Duchess held the princess's hand, telling her she was sure she would enjoy the banquet tonight. The Duchess explained that it was to celebrate the princess's recovery and that the Claudio family had prepared this small gathering. The princess entered a lavish hall and Berna commented that she must have been upset lately due to various matters. The Duchess led the princess to a room filled with expensive gowns and gifts, telling her it was a small token of their consideration for her. Berna looked on in shock at all the luxurious items. The princess thanked her aunt, claiming she didn't know she had been so considerate of her. The Duchess denied it. She added that nothing made her happier than the princess's appreciation. Meanwhile, Berna thought resentfully to herself that despite all this special treatment, Medea's reaction was cold and indifferent. The Duchess announced that there was a special dress she hoped the princess would wear to the banquet. The Duchess asked to be excused first and ordered Berna to accompany the princess after she had changed. The maids offered to help the princess dress, but she refused them. She ordered Meryl to help her. The maids left, and Berna thought sarcastically that the princess couldn't even fire the maid who had betrayed her, and wondered how she could wear such a luxurious dress. She added to herself that her face wasn't suited for expensive dresses anyway. But when she saw the princess in the dress, she was stunned. She looked breathtakingly beautiful, as if starlight had descended upon her. Meryl exclaimed, "How someone could be as beautiful as a fairy." Berna muttered in shock that it was impossible and that it shouldn't be happening. One of the maids called to her, reminding her that she should get ready too. Berna thought about the plan. Did her aunt want her to enter the hall with Medea while wearing that dress? She imagined how shabby and dull she would look next to Medea, and how people would whisper that she looked like a maid. She realized she would end up as nothing more than Medea's shadow, and described her in her mind as a vile half-breed. Berna screamed, wondering what it was that she lacked. The princess suddenly appeared and asked for her opinion on the dress. Berna, with a fake smile and tears in her eyes, replied that it was truly beautiful. In the banquet hall, guests marveled at the sparkling champagne. They conversed, saying that the princess was the one who had personally requested this party, and wondered if she was unaware of what was happening outside. A royal relative, Margrave Montega, commented that the country was at war and the streets were full of hungry citizens. Yet the princess was indulging in such luxury. Duke Claudio commented with a low laugh that Medea couldn't be blamed, as she was still young and had a long way to go to mature. He reasoned that since the king's seal was in her hands, she had nothing to fear, which made it extremely difficult to please her. He commented that although she was difficult to deal with, a banquet of this scale was enough to keep her quiet for a while. The Margrave wondered if that was really the case. The Duke smiled slyly, declaring that it was more than enough, because once Medea appeared in that specific dress, the stage he had prepared would be complete. Sure enough, the arrival of Her Highness, Princess Medea Casey de Valdina, and the young lady of the Claudio family, Berna Robin Claudio, was announced. The princess entered the hall with a confident stride, and whispers spread among the attendees. But the hall was filled with astonishment, as everyone was shocked to see that it was Berna who was wearing the lavish white dress originally intended for the princess. In contrast, Princess Medea appeared in a simple yet elegant black dress, which confused the Duke and Duchess, who wondered why the princess was wearing that.